Hello everyone, thank you for joining our Using Reports webinar. As many of you know, there's lots of ways to collect information in AccuTrack or AccuSQL. Once that information is collected in the system, then we use reports to get that information back out. There's lots of different reports in AccuTrack and AccuSQL, and this webinar will take you through how they work. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is how we get to reports in the system. And by the way, I'm logged in here as an administrator, so hopefully you have that login. So anyway, what I want to talk about first is over here on the left, we have a list of menu items, users, sign-ins, visit tracking, etc., etc. Now, based on the menu item I click over here, I can then click the Reports tab, and it will load the reports for that particular menu item. So if I want to see user reports, I would click Users, click Reports, and then I'm seeing a list of reports for students, advisors, or tutors, depending on your terminology, instructors, student groups, sports participants, grant recipients, etc. But anyway, it's all user-based reports. If I click Sign In Setup and then Reports, now it's showing me only sign-in reports, so registered students, registered activities, etc. Visits tracking reports. Now I have by activity, student attendance, so all of my visit reports. So based on the menu here, it will load the context-specific reports for the menu item selected. Okay, now if I prefer to go look at all of the reports that are available to me, I can click on Reports over here to the right, and that will load my entire list. So as you can see, I can expand these various report items, and these are all of the reports available to me using my report viewer here. Okay? Now what I'd like to do is turn this over to Laura, and she's going to talk about the basics about how we run reports, the various methods we can get the data back from reports.
Thank you, David. Let's run one of these very popular reports that usually is in student visits tracking. Let's use our report button down here. By activity is one of the favorite reports to run. So simply clicking on this and not adjusting anything over here, we can come down here and do show report. And it will give you the report with a few options at the top. For example, you can save this report as a PDF, or you can print the report, or you can have this report emailed. Now if you have a more powerful software program, you may want to just go ahead and save it as a PDF right away. That way you could open it, say, in Adobe Pro and use some of the more robust features that are in there. By the way, this report, because we didn't use any filters, has 12 pages. So sometimes this is not useful for you. So what you can do instead is export the data. In this case, let's just choose Excel Direct, hit OK, and it will open this report for you in Excel. Having it in this format might be much more useful for you to do reports and things. Now, there's also a little secret in most of our reporting, and that is anytime you see a grid. For example, let's look at this grid. I like this one in session logs because it actually includes the advisor and some of the other information that isn't in the activity report. You can simply right-click in this window, filter on specific values. For example, let's filter math. And then right-click again, and you can have the option to report it or export it, just like we did before. So anytime you see a grid in AccuTrack, you can use that feature. Now, what if you wanted to allow your students or tutors to run reports? They can do this from their main page if you've allowed the student pad. So let's log in as a student or tutor and see what's available. The student would click on the reports, and we've narrowed it down quite a bit for the student because they don't need to have all of the other options. But student attendance is something that they're most interested in. They'd like to see if they've gotten credit for the hours that they've spent in their lab, or maybe if they've gotten credit for attending certain events or workshops that you provided. This way the student can come run this report for themselves and not have to bother your staff asking whether or not they've met the requirements. Over here on the filters that we didn't use before, notice that the student is filtered out and they cannot change that. So they're not able to run reports on other students. It's just on themselves. They can also use the Show Report button and use all the same features that are at the top, or they can export the data. And you may want to show them that the most practical choice in this box is the Excel Direct. And then they can see how they're doing. Tutors are the same way. In this particular screen, our tutor pad is called Advisor Pad because basically it's the same group of people that are working with your students. We just name them differently. So we're going to log in as a tutor. And from here they could choose this reports. And notice the tutor or advisor, staff person, they have a little more to choose from by the way you control this in some of your access groups. So an advisor will probably want to look at all of their scheduled appointments. So this report can be shown. It's the same options they had before. Or if they wish, they can export this one. Okay, so let's log back in as admin. Let's go to that favorite report. By activity. Let's use a few of the options that are in the middle here. So instead of just using a detailed report, we can use a summary report. So let's see what this looks like. Instead of showing you each activity, now it's summing up the time spent in these activities. Much shorter report, only 3 pages. Let's take a look at that in Excel. So it's giving us some total time. For some of these reports, let's go back to the session log, where time is more of an issue. You'll notice that we now have an order by. For example, you may want to see this chronologically rather than by student. So you would scoot the login time to the top, and that makes for a nice report for each student. So we can see what the student did by time rather than by student. Let's take a look at this in Excel. Looks good. All right. Now David is going to show you how to use more of these filters on the side to get even more use out of these reports.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And real briefly, while I remember here, she was talking about the reports that are available to tutors, and that's through System Access, Reports Access. So I have a tutors group here, and these are the reports that we saw when we logged in as an advisor in this case, or a tutor, depending on your terminology again. But if I wanted to add visits reports to allow for the tutors, I could click that, and now any tutors that run reports would be able to run those visit reports as well. Okay, but let's go back to reports here. Okay, and I'm going to talk about the filters over here on the right. Now, Laura mentioned how there's a detailed or summary report for many of these reports, and you can click on that. But let's talk about these right filters. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is when I open my reports, wherever they may be, either context-specific or in general, I have something called filter here. Okay, it says period this semester. Now, it always defaults to this semester. But let's say that every time I run reports, I want to run them for this week. So I can pick my drop-down list here, and I have lots of choices, but I'm going to pick this week. And right up here, it's kind of hard to see, I have a little pin. Okay, so I'm going to pin that menu, and now every time I open reports, it's going to automatically default to this week. Okay, so that's a nice way to not have to go adjust your period filter every time you want to run a report. Okay, now I can unpin that, or I could set it to something else and then repin it. So that's totally up to you. If you don't pin it at all, it'll always default to this semester. Okay, so now let's talk about some other filters over here on the right. Let's say I want to run this visit by activity report, but I want to run it for a particular student. Okay, I can click the students box here and set my filter, and then find that student by name or ID, whatever column I want to sort on. I'll pick that student, and then show the report. So now I'm seeing visits by activity, but I'm only seeing them for David Arlington in this case, as you can tell. Okay, and I can do combinations of those filters. So let's say I want to see visits for David Arlington, but only when he signed into math. So if I wanted to go filter on math, I can do so. And I can click them as I'd like. Now if I want to be a little quicker, I can click the first one, hold the Shift key, and click the last one. Also, if I want to pick every other one, what I can do is hold the Control key. Okay, so when I do that, I can pick whichever ones I'd like. Okay, but I'll just click all my math ones, close. So now I'm saying show me all the visits this semester for David Arlington, but only when he signed in for math. And now I have a lot less. So trig and it looks like 2 trigs, I guess. Okay, so I can do any combination of filters that I'd like. Let's say I don't care about students. I want to see all the students that signed into my math activities, but the ones that are in this group that I have called Early Alert. Okay, so what I'm seeing now are all the students that signed into math that are members of my Early Alert student group. Okay, now that I've done that, I'd like to turn it over to Laura again, and she's going to show us how we can create a student group from our report results.
This is a nice and powerful feature in AccuTrack that lets you do groups out of your reports. Okay, for this report, let's use the 0 visits. 0 visits means that the database is going to look for students who have not logged into either a particular activity or have not logged in at all. I'm going to change the filter up here to this semester. And then I'm going to filter it again to a particular group called my Early Alert. So I would like to see if these students that have already been identified as possibly having difficulties, to see if they've already logged in or if they're not coming to the labs or centers. So I'm going to export this data because I wanted you to see this particular choice. It says filter for registered students only. And in this case, where we don't really care whether or not the student was registered for all the activities available in the centers and labs, we're going to say no. We're going to export this to Excel, take a look at it, see if it looks like what I'm looking for, and it is. These students have not logged into anything, and they are part of the Early Alert group. And so now I'm going to use this third button down here, and I'm going to create a student group. Again, I'm going to say no. I'm going to call this the Early Alert EA no-show. Now if we go back to our users and our student groups, we're now going to see this group that we created. This can be very helpful for future communications with these students or other reports. Okay, now I'm going to hand it back to David.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And what I'm going to talk about next are the various right-click menu options that are available for reports. Okay, so again, I can expand my reports and look at them. Let's look at visits by activity. We keep using that just because that's such a popular report. But I have some various options. Now, let's say that I run the visits by activity report quite often, and I could, if I wanted to, use the context help, go use visit tracking reports, and it would limit my reports to a lot less than if I clicked it here. But let's say that I run that report quite often. What I can do is expand it here, and then right-click, and I have an option that says add to favorites. Okay, when I do that, I can make it available for me or for anyone. I can put a yellow box on it if I'd like. But what it does is adds it down here to my favorites list. Okay, so here's my by activity. I had a few other ones there, but I can pick and choose what my favorite reports are. Let's say I like to run a sport participation report often. I'll add that to my favorites. Make available to everyone. Let's say I want to see my student profile. So you can build your own list of your favorites. And then again, down here in my favorites list, here's the reports that I have added to that. Okay, now let's talk about the next option. And that's, I'm going to discuss memorizing a report. Now let's get out and back in just so we have a better look at this. When I click reports, now nothing is pinned. I could pin it to this week, but remember that's for every report I'm going to run is going to run for this week. Let's say I have a particular visits by activity report that I want to run for every month, but I only want it for my early alert students that have signed into math, for example. Now, if I went through that manually, I could pick period, I could pick activities math, I could pick my student group, early alert, and then I could run my report. And I don't have any records this period, which means nobody in my early alert group is signed into math, which shame on them. But anyway, let's say that I would want to do this same report tomorrow. Okay, if I closed the report and went back in and looked at it again, well, it's back to this semester. I don't have any activities selected. I don't have any student groups selected, so I'd have to build that all over again. But there's an easier way, and that's to memorize the report. So let's pick it again. Let's pick this month. Let's pick our math activities. And let's pick our early alert group. Okay, but now instead of running the report, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to memorize this report. Okay, so I'll call it this month EA. And I'll make it available to everyone. I don't care about the tooltip. Okay, and now I'm done. So I'm going to get out and back in so we can see how that works. Remember, visits by activity have to set all the filters again, right? But now under my memorized reports, by activity this month EA, when I click on that, well, it's changed to this month and it has my filters already memorized. So I can memorize it just the way I'd like, and then all I have to do is go click it and run it, okay, instead of having to set those filters each time. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is how to customize a report. Now, there's a built-in report editor in AccuTrack and AccuSQL, but honestly, it's kind of difficult to work in. It doesn't have a lot of fields available to it, so it may not do exactly what you want. I'll still show it to you, but just to give you a little history, we had lots of people that were asking us for specific reports. That's why our report list is so big. but it seems like every one that we would build or add for a customer wasn't exactly what they wanted, so we kept adding more and more. Finally, we decided instead of continuing to build reports this way and get this list so large, we designed something called custom queries where you can build your own report and get exactly the information you want. So I'll show you that in a bit. The custom report editor that we have built in may be a little passé for most of you, but I still want to show you how it works. Okay, so let's say I have this by activity report, but I want to add a student's profile information to it. Now, real quickly, what is a profile? Okay, when I go look at my students, for example, or let's go to demographics, sorry. If I do my profile here, I have various profile fields available to me. Now, in this case, I have something called major, something called minor, did I graduate from high school, etc., etc. But if you look at the order, this is profile field 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? So let's say in my custom visits by activity report, I want to add their major and minor to my report. Okay? I can do that by right-clicking and then clicking Customize this report. Let's just call it major. Okay, make available to everyone, sure. Tooltip. Okay, and now we're looking at the custom report editor. So this is the back end of that visits by activity report. Okay, now I'm going to drag this down to make a little room for myself. And let's say I want to change the name of this report. So I'll say by activity major. Okay, and let's say, okay, now I need to add my profile fields. Remember I said major and minor, which are P1 and P2 in my case. But right here, I have something called field in my reports control box. I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to drag a little rectangle right here. Okay. Now once I've done that, it pops open a box where I can then add the profile field that I want. Now if I click these dots right here and then look at my fields over on the left, these are the fields that I'm allowed to add to that report. And as I said before, they're pretty limited. Like for example, let's say I wanted to add the advisor that the student saw for that activity. Well, I don't see anything called tutor or advisor in my field list, so I can't do that. Okay, but what I can do is add my profile field. So I'll say P1 is my major, and then I'll add another one over here, let's say. We'll call this P2, which is minor. And let's say I want to add a label to those. So major. Now if I want to get fancy here, I can just right-click and copy that and then paste it and drag it over here. And then we'll rename that to minor. Okay, and then I could pretty that up, but for argument's sake, that's good enough. So now I have major and minor as part of my now by activity major report. When I click the X here to close out of that window, it'll ask me to save, which I want to do. And now we're back in reports, but I now have a customized reports list, and I have by activity major right here. So when I run that report, it's going to show me by activity major, and here's Michelle D. She's computer science major, meditation minor. Let's go down. Aaron Aardvark, English and business. David Arlington, computer science and guitar. Okay, so I've customized that report to add the information that I wanted to it. Okay, but as you can tell, it's kind of awkward to work in. It does have some power to it, though, and I want to show you one thing on our website. This is our old website, actually. But here at AccuTrack.org/support/cust_rep.htm, I have some examples here, step by step, of the power that is available in that report editor. For example, adding a count of students, help by tutor or tutoring session. Anyway, if you click on these various ones, I have step-by-step instructions with screenshots of exactly what you can do to customize the reports accordingly. So if you're feeling ambitious, I would recommend you go out there and take a look at that. Okay, now I'd like to turn it over to Nick, and he's going to show us some pretty cool tricks about things we can do once the data is in Excel.
Thanks, Dave. All right, so a lot of times on your reports, you get the report version. You may like that. You get an export though, and you're like, let's say we look at this weekly student time and do show report. Now this one just happens to be an Excel report by default anyway, but there's certain ones that when you export it, you're getting these times in various things like seconds or minutes, and you want that to actually be reflective of hours and minutes. So when you get down to these totals, like 121 minutes would look better on your report as 2 hours and 1 minute. Same with these large totals down here, 13,254 minutes. You would like to know what that is in hours and minutes. So what we've done is actually come up with some formulas that are just regular Excel formulas that you can use. All right, and the first one here is converting. If you get a report that happens to be in seconds, converts it to hours in decimal form. And all we're doing is we're dividing the seconds into minutes and then again in hours, so you can shorten that to this. Or if you have one that's already in minutes, we're just taking it and converting it to hours here. All right, and then finally, you also want to format it correctly. So we're converting it to daytime by dividing by 24, and then we're using the hour-minute format. And then finally, we're combining those two formulas to get what we want. So I'm going to copy this last formula because the report back here is actually in minutes, so we need to convert it from minutes to the hour-minute format. Okay, and I'm just going to paste our formula up here. We're going to use that in just a second. But what I need to do is I'm going to create a data set of this this entire table. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And on the second tab here, I'm going to go ahead and paste just the values. So when I paste just the values, now I have a second sheet that I'm going to use for data. Okay, so I can take this formula and I'm going to put it in the very first cell of the table. Okay, and what I need to do is I need to replace this with where it says cell, and I need to put the exact cell that we want to convert. So we're going to look at our second sheet here that I'm using for the data, and we're just going to click on E5, which is the same cell on the other sheet, and hit enter. Okay, so now I have it in hours and minutes. And on the other sheet it was 0 for that report, so that's what it's showing. If I hover over the bottom right corner, I get a little black plus symbol. This will allow me to drag this out to the end, that formula out to the end of the table. And you can see how that 121 minutes is now converted to 2 hours and 1 minute. And for the rest of the table, as long as I have that highlighted, I can do that same thing where I highlight over the bottom right corner to get the little black plus symbol and drag that down over my entire table that I have. So when I get down to the bottom, now instead of 13,000 minutes, I have 220 hours and 54 minutes, which is a lot easier for you to read on those reports. And it also did the entire table that way. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to close this. We actually have another one that I prepared here. This was that by activity that we're used to. It was a summary. And this is just an example of using it with the seconds formula. So you can see the first report that I got just had the time period in seconds. And what I went ahead and did is on the next sheet here, I converted it first to decimal, 1.28 hours, which actually converts, when you format it, 1 hour and 17 minutes. And then, if you want to get really fancy, after you've added those formulas and maybe you added some sums down here, averages, you can, then take that data and just, highlight it and do insert charts of any kind, pie charts, bar charts, what have you. And that's all been created from, converting that over, and then I've got my times and everything here. All right, so that's pretty much all I have. I'm going to hand it back over to David. He's going to go over the custom query generator.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you, Nick. Okay, and as I had mentioned earlier, we have that report editor here in reports, but I also mentioned custom queries. And again, custom queries allow you to build your own queries or reports any way you see fit. Okay, and I'll show you briefly how that works, and then we'll go into some more detailed examples. Okay, when I open custom queries here, I'll click New. And by the way, if I've already saved one, I can load it. I'll show you how to save one in a second. But I'll click New. Okay, and the first thing we'll see is what do you want to base your query from? Okay, now this is your base table here. So it doesn't have to be specific. It just needs to be related to something that you're trying to get data for. So for example, if I want to get some information about my students, I would pick a student table here. If I wanted it from tutors, I would pick something related to tutors. For example, if I want to get a student report, well, I probably wouldn't want to base it on media checkouts. So just pick your base table, click Next, and then I have students here. If I click the plus sign, it shows me all of the different columns, the fields that are available to me for the students. Okay, now let's say in this example, I'd like to get the students first name, last name, email, and their major. Okay, so I can just click the boxes I want, last name, first name, let's say ID, email, and remember the profile fields. Well, let's say we want their major and their minor. Okay, so just that simply, I click what I want, I click Next, and I'll ignore this for now. I'll show you more about this in a second. Let's say I want to sort it on the student's last name. I can sort or subsort however I see fit. Okay, and finish. And now if I click Excel, it will open directly and show me what I just did. So I have last name, first name, sorting on last name, ID, email, their major, and their minor in this case. Okay. Now what I can do if I want is, again, build that report, but this time I'm going to save it. So I'll pick students, last, first, ID, email, major, minor, sort on last name, but here, save as. If I click that box, then I can call it what I'd like. Let's just call it that. Finish, and I still have my report the way it was. So there's the look at my report. But let's say tomorrow I want to run that report. Okay, I click Custom Queries. All I have to do is click Load, and I don't have to build all that report. All I have to do is just click it, and then it's ready to go. Okay, okay, now another thing I want to mention here, I'm just clicking Excel, but you can certainly export these reports in lots of different format. A text file, so if you wanted to use a CSV file to then import into something else, HTML file if you wanted to put it on the web, XML file, which is a good format if you'd like to exchange that data with other applications. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with XML, but it writes the data structure basically. Here I have, and these are kind of hard to read, I know, but I can use built-in report viewers with the program itself. So I could use, you recall that custom report editor. I could open this up in my custom report editor and then make it look however I'd like. A mail merge, which I'll show you an example of shortly. But there are lots of different data formats. Now if I preview that report, I can see all of the records that are in it, and then I can pick some or all of them. I can sort them, so there's quite a bit I can do here. Let's say that I only want my economics people. I could sort on that in my preview, close it, and then export it to Excel. So now I'm seeing only my economics people. Okay. Now if you want to get all of the information, you would just right-click and do Select All. Okay? All right, so that's the basics of the custom queries, but let's run a couple little bit more detailed custom queries just to show you some of the power of this option. Okay, this time I want to get my student's ID, last name, first name, let's say email, but I also want to know any logins or logouts they've had to AccuTrack, and I'd also like to know the categories and activities that they've signed into. Now, behind the scenes, what we're doing with that report is using the students table, using the categories table, using the activities table, and using a table called logbook that stores all the sign-ins and sign-outs. So what I'm doing here is building my own report using 4 different tables in AccuTrack. Okay, I'll do custom queries, new, and again I'll use students. So I said last name, first name, ID, email. Let's scroll down here a bit. And I didn't want major, but I could do that if I wanted to. But here's what I want to see right here. Student sign-in logs. Remember I said I want to know when they signed in and signed out. Now let's expand activity. I also want to know their category and activity. Okay. So show me that student information. Show me when they logged in and logged out and what their categories and activities were. I click Next. And let's say I want to sort on the category. Finish, and Excel is fine. So we can see the report. Last, first, ID, email. Oh, I put major in there. Okay, and then log in, log out, category. And remember, I sorted by category, so there they are in order. And the activity. Okay. All right, continuing now. We're going to, and you can see we're going from the very simple to the more complex as we go along. Okay, this next report, what I'd like to do is get the student information again, but this time what I'd like to do is give me those sign-ins for my students, but I only want to see them if they've signed in after January 1st of 2014. Okay? So here we go. Students. Okay, and again, I want to get my sign-in logs. I want the login time, logout time. I want the category and activity. And I'm going to click Next. Okay, but now we're going to use our filters here. And remember, I said if they've signed in after January 1st of 2014. So I'm going to click my login time here from my property. And I'm going to say is greater than. Okay, and then I said 0101. 2014. Okay, and that's the format we use for dates in AccuTrack or AccuSQL. So you can see January is a 01, and then the day 01 for the first day. So 09 would be the 9th day, and then 10, 11, 12, etc. And we use the full YYYY format for the year. Okay, but I'll add that filter. Next, and finish. And let's take a look at it. Okay. So, and maybe it'd be easier to see that in Excel. Okay, so what I've got here are a series of logins with the student information, category, activity, etc. But what I also have is my login time. And as we go through these login times, well, it starts on February 11th and it ends on May 8th. But I don't have anything before January 1st of 2014, which I set my filter for. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to go for the next example, which is the student information, the login, logout, category, activity. This time I want to get my tutor or advisor, so the person that they met with, but I only want to get it when they signed in between December 1st of 2013 and February 18th of 2014. Further, I only want to do it when they're members of my early alert student group. Okay, well that's a mouthful, but let's take a look how that would work. And you can see the options are pretty limitless here. If you can dream up what you want to get, you can do it in this custom query generator. Okay, but let's go through this example. Student last, first, ID, email. Okay, from my student now, one new one here is, remember I said only for my early alert students. So I want to add my group name because I want to filter on that. Sign-in logs again. I want to know when they logged in, when they logged out. I want to know the category and the activity that they signed into. But I also want to know from here the first name and the last name of the tutor that they met with. Okay? So let's do our first one here is, remember I said between, December 1st to February 18th, I believe. So I'll pick login time, and this time I'll pick between and put those dates. And I'll add that. But I also want my early alert students. So right here, I have group name, and I'll put is equal to early alert. Okay, so I've combined filters here between that date range for early alert students. Click Next. Now let's say I want to sort that on, I don't know, how about tutor last name? And I want to save it. And I'll finish, and let's see what we've got. Okay, now there's not too many there, but what we're seeing is, and again we'll look at it in Excel because I think it's an easier way to view it. Or we could look at it in HTML if we want to get ambitious. So what we've got here is last name. Now what did we sort on? We sorted on the tutor, didn't we? The tutor's last name. So Cindy Bright, Morgan Freeman. So I've got the student information. They're all members of my early alert group. And remember, it was between December 1st of 2013 through February 18th of 2014. So they all, we have an 11 and 3 17s, their category, their activity, etc. So I've built that report. Now if we think about this behind the scenes, let's see if we can go through this. Student table, the student group table, the logbook table, the category table, the activity table, and the tutor table, all in that one report. So I could never do that using that report editor that we had, that I showed you from the earlier example. But really the sky's the limit with this custom query generator. Okay? And if you have any particular questions about that custom query generator as you start getting into building those reports, please give us a call here. We're more than happy to help with that. Okay, so in summation, as you can tell, we've got some pretty robust reporting here in AccuTrack and AccuSQL. You can use your basic reports and get lots and lots of information. Probably 90% of the time you're going to find a report that will get just the information you need. But if you don't find it, then you can use a custom query and generate a report any way that you see fit. Okay, so whatever data you collect in AccuTrack, there's going to be a way to get it back out and report on it. Okay? And we thank you for your time. Bye.